I'm Andrew Southworth, and this is my Point 4 Cents.
I'm Dustin Boyer.
Hi, and I'm Matt Bacon, and today we're talking about the death of Spotify, Suno and its inherent hypocrisy and lack of understanding of how music actually works. And I interviewed my good friend of the show, Eyal Levi, owner and founder of URM Academy, the biggest online rock and metal school for musicians, and that gets real interesting.
Then after the interview, we'll talk about SEO, MusoSoup, SubmitHub, and the value of budget PR platforms like that, and also the role of physical media.
But wait, where's Jesse Cannon?
Jesse,
That's a good question.
Why?
Jesse has other things in life he's doing, such as working on a documentary, and we had to, let him roam free and finish other things in his life. So he'll be back. But in the meantime, we are going to be having a rotating fourth guest, or potentially just the three of us some weeks. And we're also going to be shifting the day of the podcast to Thursday, which you're going to find out about this week as well. But yeah, some sad changes in that you won't see Jesse here. But if you don't like Jesse, then maybe it's a good change. So.
And my self-esteem is going to improve. So
Yeah, the constant big brothering of Matt Bacon will end. Well, maybe
I don't know. I think
Andrew and I
should
should take up that mantle. Yeah. Just give him shit.
He is still the youngest one on the podcast.
That's true. He is a baby. How old are you? 29?
I'm 30.
You're 30?
It's really funny. Now. This is like an interesting thing just before we get into it. For younger people, like if you get into the scene when you're young, it does not matter how old you are. Like there's still people who knew you when you were 18 and tell everyone they knew you when you were 18. And so you're just always 18. Which is interesting.
That's why everybody switches to country at some point, because they got to get a new scene where they age themselves up. They get out of metal and get into country.
Basically. But we have a lot of interesting topics today. First, we want to talk about this really interesting article that Jimmy Iovine, who is one of the most important music executives in the world, said he thinks Spotify is minutes away from death.
Being obsolete. Technically, he said being obsolete.
Yeah. So
there's a difference when we'll get into it.
Yeah, and specifically, just to pull up the quote.
While Matt's finding this, I will list some of the credits of this guy. He co-founded Interscope, built Beats by Dre, and then sold it to Apple for $3 billion to help launch Apple Music. So if you don't know who Jimmy Iovine... Is it Jimmy Iovine? Is that how you say his name?
Jimmy... What? I'm losing my train of thought. Jimmy Iovine. Jimmy Iovine. Are you guys not familiar with Jimmy Iovine? He's like one of the most legendary...
I just always thought it was pronounced Iovine.
I never heard of him until this article. Like when you said his name...
But it's you.
Like, yeah, that's me. So
okay, so his larger point is, so there's two things to kind of keep in mind here, okay?
Oh my God, it is Iovine. Iovine.
Okay,
I did not know that. I've been saying Iovine forever. Wow, that's embarrassing.
So there's 2 points here that I think are really important, okay? The first point that he talks about is that the major labels no longer sort of control the means and of production. The quote is... Yes. So for the first time in history, we the majors don't control the entire means of consumption. What he means by that is back in the day, it used to be if you were on RCA Records, right, which is the example Joel Gouveia uses in his excellent Substack post. If you were on RCA Records, not only did they like sign the artists and help promote them, but they owned the distribution company, and that was like the only way to get those records out to the people. But also they invented 45 RPM LPs, and they manufactured the record players that you had to buy to listen to it, right? Record labels used to, Philips invented, which was owned by Polygram, invented the CD and also the cassette, right? Or no, they invented the cassette, not the CD. But what I'm trying to say is like Sony invented the Walkman and obviously owned CBS Records, which is now Sony basically, right? Like they didn't just own the rights, they owned sort of the plastic the art was printed on. And obviously there's problems with that. But the other problem comes with this chart, which is in the article.
Are you talking about the margin death trap chart?
Yes, the margin death trap chart, which I believe you can see here on screen.
Yeah.
And so basically the problem that all these people have, all these services have, is that they basically all pay 70% of all their streaming revenue out to artists, right? Which means that your profit margin doesn't get bigger just because you have something on your catalog that's streaming well for the streaming service, right? Because if I own the music, if I own the rights to the record and then I'm pressing the records, then my income goes up, but it goes up kind of exponentially because the amount I spent is fixed because I had to pay for the record and then I have to pay for like CDs or whatever. But that's kind of a fixed thing that I can work around, or if you look at like a Netflix, a more modern example, right? Netflix, they pay $100 million for a new season of Stranger Things. They don't need to pay much. They don't need to pay beyond that. They just own the rights to Stranger Things. They own the product and they own the pipes. Even if they license Seinfeld for 20 years or whatever they license Seinfeld for, right? They now have the exclusive rights to the product and they own the way that you consume the product, which means that like after their however many 100 million investment in Seinfeld, they're good now.
It's like it's the difference between a business that's built on being pipes versus a business that's built on like owning IP. Whereas like if you own IP, you have an upfront cost of making the IP and marketing it or whatever it is. But then like Spotify doesn't own any. They own their IP for the technology, but they don't own any of the actual music. And so they're just the pipes, which means they get a 30% of everything that passes through them for functionally like, I don't want to say not doing anything, but like not making the product itself. Whereas Netflix, it's like they spend a ton of money and risk making the product, but they can scale more predictably because if they get 100 million more customers, they're not paying more for that content. They already made the content. They own the IP, which I think is the point here.
And by the way, like this whole article written by Joel Gouveia was based off of a quote and what Jimmy Iovine discussed in a Founders podcast. And I actually don't know how much of this is coming from Joel or some of it is talked about directly by Jimmy. But I think that Jimmy's whole point is that essentially like what you guys are saying, yes, but these platforms, like you said, they're pipes. They've squished down and commodified music to a point where there's a lot of missing value in the music industry, right? So like let's say that the music industry, it's much more than this, but let's say it's $1 billion worth of revenue. And what Jimmy's saying is that there is $5 billion worth of potential revenue. And because that these music has been commodified, there's a lot of music fans who are searching for other places to put their money essentially. And because these platforms, especially Spotify, has gotten between the fan and the artist and is collecting that data, right? They want the fan to be connected to the DSP, not the artist, right? They want them to be a fan of Spotify, not the artist. That now fans and artists are going around these platforms and trying to find that extra $4 billion worth of revenue. And that is essentially why they're going to be obsolete, because now people are navigating around it. And Spotify has failed to capitalize on this revenue while everybody else is throwing their hands up and being like, if you're not going to do it, we're going to figure out a way.
But also part of the problem with Spotify is, so like for years now on Spotify, you could have your merch on Spotify. And they've recently made that integration significantly better than it was. Or recently, a few years ago, they made the integration significantly better than it was. But I've worked with tons and tons of artists, and none have ever really seen significant income coming from the having access to the merch on Spotify. Like even like major superstars, because people are interacting with platforms the way they're used to interacting with platforms, right? Which is to say, the way most of us use Spotify is we pull up an album we want to listen to or a playlist, we press play, and then we don't look at it again.
Well, and this is part of the issue, because if Spotify allowed for you as an artist to connect with fans, you can use that data to sell. It's because it's at the bottom of a page, and you're right, people aren't perusing profile pages on Spotify, but Spotify is literally charging us. Like, if we want to run a marquee ad to retarget listeners, excuse me, is that not already the data that belongs to? They're selling the artist's own data to themselves for temporary access, and even that is within the constraints that Spotify has dictated, right? So it could have been the merch great. People talk about the tip jar thing, right? That has been an idea for Spotify forever. Why isn't there a tip jar? I'd give more money. It's because it wouldn't.
It's been there since 2020. Yeah.
Yeah. But nobody uses it. Like, I've never seen.
I didn't even know that. Where is the tip jar?
You can literally pin it to the very top of your profile. You can connect PayPal. You can connect like all the major tip platforms and pin it to the top of your profile. And essentially, zero fans tip artists that way, and the fact
it's because there's no way to notify. Right, because when we do marketing, direct marketing, when we want to sell merchandise, it is not a matter of just putting the merchandise on your website. You have to remind fans that it exists. You have to stand on stage and go, our merch table's in the back. We're going to go be hanging out by our merch table. You have to do that digitally. And when Spotify gatekeeps the data that belongs rightfully to the artist because they want to have the relationship with the fan, then there's no way. I didn't even know that, because there's no way to sell that. There's no way to be like, go tip us. And if there was, you're like, don't do it on Spotify, do it directly through me, and this is my data. So Spotify has shot themselves in the foot, because now the industry, including the major labels, are trying to design software to go around DSPs.
Yeah, because the stuff that's valuable is giving people a deeper relationship with the thing that gives them some sort of emotional feedback or community feedback, which we're going to talk about, I think, a little bit in our next section, or I want to talk about. But just to kind of touch on that, I think part of the appeal of being a fan of something is that you're in a room with other people who are a fan of the same thing. And so, Andrew and I both like Pelagic Records. We feel emotionally closer because we both like Pelagic Records. Straight up, right? And I think that finding ways to highlight that is significantly more valuable. And Spotify doesn't necessarily have those community building tools where it's I would love to meet more Natural Snow Buildings fans. I don't know where to find those people because the subreddit is very dead.
Imagine if Spotify had a feature where there's you can make micro communities around a genre or an artist, but you can only enter that micro community once you've listened to X percentage of your music consumption of that artist per month, and then you get a ticket into the community. Because they could do that. They could be you list more than 25% of your music consumption is these 5 artists. You can now access this community and hang out with people that are that. And that might be a horrible idea for a bunch of reasons, but it's also kind of badass. And
couldn't you do that through an API token? If you took Spotify's API and took listenership data, could you create that app? I bet you could. I'm gonna vibe code that later. See if it's possible.
Probably some way to do it. But they have not really come out with any They have the the end of the year Spotify Wrapped, and they have some stuff around that, but there isn't really a way to interact with the artists you love more deeply. There isn't a way to connect with other fans. And the Spotify thing, I know one artist in particular has 300, 400,000 monthly listeners. He gets a handful of Spotify merch sales per month. It's not crazy. It's a couple. So that integration doesn't it's not a game changer. It's nice. The only one I'd say that's actually kind of a game changer is the touring integration. I'd say probably more than half of the shows I go to in a year I find out because of Spotify. But aside from that, they don't do a great job of connecting fans to artist.
Well, and they want to hold the reins. They want to control. That's the real problem. And they're probably looking like nobody's using the tip jar feature. Nobody's using the merch. Well, yeah, of course, because you're not. It doesn't behoove Spotify to sell it and remind fans. It behooves the artists. So therefore, they're not selling it. But then they're looking at these features, being like, people don't want to support the artists. No, you're just not giving artists the ability to reach their fans with these features.
But I think it's also a thing of, like, again, people are... You have to think about how people interact with a given platform. So, for example, because I was thinking about this because I was looking at a podcast I listen to that's pretty popular and doesn't get a lot of comments. So I just pulled up Joe Rogan's last episode with RFK Jr., which is, like, really, like, playing to the Joe Rogan base. On Spotify, which has a comment feature for podcasts, there's, like, a couple hundred comments on, like, the biggest podcast in the world. You know, that same YouTube video, like, let's go see, has, you know, thousands and thousands of comments, I'm sure, because it's a different way of interacting with the YouTube video has 8,700 comments. Yeah. Joe Rogan is owned by Spotify functionally. Right.
I wonder, but part of that is, like, people just aren't used to, because those features are newer.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, right? Is, like, I don't know if there is a way from here to serving super fans on Spotify because people don't interact with it that way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
One more thing too, for everyone watching, when we're saying Spotify, we really mean all of them, because Spotify is actually the only one that has any of these features. Apple Music doesn't give you merch or show information or a tip jar. Neither does Deezer, neither does Tidal, neither does Qobuz, neither does Napster, neither does Yandex, neither does... So Spotify is actually the leader in fan interaction, but even still, there's a lot.
They live and die by it, though. I mean, here's the thing. The obsolete conversation, sure, it applies. I mean, you could argue that Apple Music's already obsolete, but Apple doesn't need Apple Music. Spotify needs Spotify, right? So in some ways, they're in danger more than any other platform. Then maybe Tidal.
Tidal and Deezer and Qobuz are all on their own. Well, no, Tidal's owned by Square, so they're actually not as reliant.
Yeah, but this is kind of my point. This is the other thing, right? Like, this is sort of the argument that Apple Music will make, which is essentially like, yeah, we can pay better because we're not a music company. Yeah. You know, and I think that, like, honestly, the way I see it is, like, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Like streaming is not going away, but I think that the people who are successful with streaming over the long term are going to be the people who view it as a loss leader. You know, because having Apple Music makes your iPhone experience better. And I feel like that's... And obviously there'll always be, like, niche platforms like Qobuz or whatever, and that's great. But, you know, I don't see a way where it's not kind of that, you know. But it also makes me think of, like, the analog example. The analog, is, like, the places that still sell CDs are, like... I mean, I think Best Buy doesn't sell CDs anymore, but Best Buy was, like, a big carrier of CDs for a long time. Yeah. You know, or Walmart is another good example, where it's like Walmart is selling Taylor Swift records not because they make money on Taylor Swift records, but because Taylor Swift record gets you inside Walmart. And then you also need to buy something they actually make money on, and you're already in Walmart, so you might as well.
It's like the Costco rotisserie chicken loss leader.
Yeah. No, the Costco, I thought it was their pizza or hot dogs.
The $1.50.
Oh, they had too. The $1.50 hot dog and drink. Or literally loses money.
IKEA and the meatballs.
It's a negative.
Yeah. It's negative. God, that's sort of depressing. Sometimes I think about the music industry in that way. Like, are we just everybody's loss leader? Like, are we just the cultural rubber stamp that everybody needs in order to sell their widgets or their couches or whatever the fuck they want to sell?
You know, it used to be like the the tour was just existed to sell the album, and like tickets were cheap essentially because like it was like, let's just get people there and like we'll sell a bunch of albums. And now it's like kind of the opposite, where the album exists to sell the tour. And
that's depressing.
But then the artists are getting squeezed on the Ticketmaster side, and just in general all venues, like things are getting squeezed from every angle. But like you probably all talked to so many artists where it's like, I don't actually care about streaming and social media. I only care about it to the extent that it allows me to do more in the live world. And then other people where it's like, I actually don't want to tour. I only tour because it makes me money. So like there's all that.
But but I will say, I do literally also know people with upwards of 1 million Spotify monthlies. So that's kicking up like 1 million Spotify monthlies kicks up like 10K a month.
Mm-hmm.
And they just use the tour. They tour super comfortable and tour at a complete break even, if not a small loss, because they make their money on streaming or radio, right? Like a lot of people, if you get like a couple good radio hits, as long as you can tour enough to keep those on Sirius XM rotation,
that's really the key.
20
is Sirius
20 times a week, you're fucking done. And like, so there's a lot of people touring like above their pay grade, like in terms of like lifestyle, because like like you'll see artists who are playing like a bus costs you like two to $2.5 grand a day, functionally, like a big tour bus, when you include like driver and gas and stuff. Might even be more like 3, depending on whatever. But like you'll see people who are like playing 500 cap rooms who probably can't actually afford that, but it's like, but this isn't where we make our money. We make our money on streaming and radio.
And a lot of them just want to create amazing experiences for their fans as well. Like a lot of artists, like they're promoting a show of theirs. Sometimes it is like, this has to make sense financially, but a lot of times it's like, oh, this show is doing really bad. Should we like turn off the marketing for it? It's like, oh no, we need the ticket sales. I don't care if we're losing money per ticket sale. We need I want to have a great show, and we'll worry about it. And honestly, that does pay off long term, because then those fans might come back the next time you're in town. And I've seen it for artists I've done like tours on for like years in a row, that like every year those same dates get better, because they invested up front and like pulling off a great show,
Well, so do we agree with Jimmy Iovine that the days of Spotify's relevancy? And I think this is the point too, is like, because he made the reference to like how major labels owned the levers, now Spotify and other digital platforms own the levers, and when he says they're going obsolete, he means like the same way the labels went obsolete. Like they don't own the levers, they don't have the power that they used to, essentially.
Well, the big end, he says, we're witnessing the death of the mass audience and the birth of the micro community, which we've talked about in the past, that like a lot of the internet shifting to like micro communities instead of broad social media. And it kind of makes sense to a degree. He's saying direct ownership of your audiences is going to be the path going forward. But I don't know. I have a feeling that it's not going to be like a mainstream thing per se. It's just going to be like this, where do the super fans go, which is where the money goes. So like the streaming platforms are still where most people consume their music, and they're doing fine, but then the super fans are thriving in like more micro communities, and that's where like the actual money is made. So you find the communities on a streaming service, and then you go somewhere else to be like a super fan.
Hey Matt, by the way, I don't know if you're tapping every once in a while or something, but your mic is...
I was writing an email because I'm angry at an employee.
Okay. We can hear the keyboard.
Okay.
Keep that in.
I will.
Well, who's editing again?
Keep that Matt in. Scolding in.
Yeah. Keep the part where I bully Matt.
Hey, so I'm here with Eyal Levi, the one and only guitarist of DAATH, founder of URM Academy. How are you, Eyal?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
Well, let's talk about URM Academy. For people who don't know, what is that and how did it get started?
URM Academy is a company I started. We're basically the largest online school for rock and metal producers. And I started it with 2 partners, Joey Sturgis and Joel Gouveia, about 10 years ago. Yeah, this is our 10th year. Because it seemed like every other genre of music on the planet had a way for people to learn how to record it and produce it, and metal was just not taken seriously. You can go to recording school and learn how to record metal. There was nothing online for it except for just some randos here and there with really bad advice. But the people who were making great records were not passing the information on to the next generation. And a lot of them were actually gatekeeping that information. And I felt like the future was going to happen, whether people liked it or not. The people were going to start recording at home. The barrier to entry was going to get lower. And whether or not these older dudes liked it, the younger generation was going to be recording themselves, and they were going to be mixing stuff that people recorded on their own. And then the future generation of producers, which we were right, because that's what's happening now, we're going to be musicians. So it was going to be the future generation of producers. We knew back then that they were going to be dudes from bands who got some, like back then, an M box. Now it would be like a Focusrite, and got a DAW and started recording their own music, and one thing led to another, and they started recording other people, and one thing led to another, and they had a career. And that's kind of this new career path that producers have that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. And we wanted to align ourselves with that and make sure that people going down that path knew what they were doing, and that the overall quality of, I guess, the way metal sounded didn't just go downhill and tank.
What was the initial reaction to this kind of thing?
From who?
Like users.
Users were stoked. It grew really fast. It was one of those things that I guess you would say had a product market fit, because from the moment that we launched our flagship product, Nail the Mix, it just exploded, and it didn't start to slow down for several years. And the slowdown was just because that's what happens when you have a subscription business. Is there comes a point, you still have spikes, but the big, the big tsunami part of it only lasts so long. But on the other side of it, there were producers, and their response to it was, let's just say, hit or miss. There were some people who were very, very into what we were doing, and then there were other people who felt very threatened by what we were doing and were very, very negative about it, and kind of subscribed to the old rules of sharing information that are kind of like, they kind of act like this is the CIA or something, and you're sharing, and these are classified secrets that national security is riding on, as opposed to, we're just making metal sound cool. Nobody's getting hurt. Nobody's going to die. So
it's bizarre how seriously some people take themselves, especially in heavy metal, which is kind of inherently a little bit silly.
I feel two ways about it, because on the one hand, yes, it's silly because it's just music. At the end of the day, I know that music helps people with life, and without art and without things that we enjoy doing, life is kind of pointless. If the only thing you're worried about is life or death and survival, then that's not a great life. However, it is just music, and the way people act about it is a little over the top in how seriously they take themselves. However, on the other hand, you got to go all in if you're going to do music, right? So if you're going to get good at music or great at music and going to do anything with it, you have to take it seriously. So there's this fine line where it gets into delusional versus someone that has their shit together or their head on straight.
And so let's talk about that for a second. What does going, because obviously we both know a lot of people who say they're going all in who are very clearly not all in. What does going all in on music look like?
Going all in on music. Okay, so first of all, this is for entertainment purposes only. I'm not suggesting anybody actually do this because I don't want to be responsible for you ruining your life. But almost every single successful person I've met in music, and by successful, I mean that they make their entire living off of music and not in a way that they hate.
Yeah.
Every single person I know who has pulled that off, whether it's in metal or something else, has not had a plan B, or they had a plan B that directly worked with plan A. So, for instance, someone in a band who also records bands. Those two, there's a symbiotic relationship there because you get better at recording your own band. If your band starts to do better, you get more clients because people like the way your band sounds. You get more experience because you're recording bands, et cetera, on and on. That's a plan A and a plan B that can, I actually don't even see them as two different things. Like I see that all as plan A. But point being that if you're going to have some sort of a quote unquote safety net, where I've seen it work is where the safety net is something that works directly with music, or is in music, is just not the band. Now, that's actually a smart way to go about it because how many people do you know who can make ends meet just off of a band?
Yeah.
The absolute minority, right?
Yeah. Less than most people would think.
Yeah. So having more than one way to make an income off of music, I think, is kind of crucial. But that's what it means, in my opinion, to go all in, is to set up your life to where music is what's making your life possible as an adult. That's where your bills are getting paid from. That's what you do all day long. And when you're not in that position yet, when you haven't gotten there, you have to be orienting your life in that direction, which this is the part where I gave the disclaimer earlier, because when you haven't gotten to that point, it's kind of scary and odds of success are kind of low, and odds that you're going to make, even a respectable amount of money are very, very low. And so, if I had a kid and my kid wanted to do this, obviously I wouldn't stop them, but I would have to be sure that they have what it takes. Otherwise, I would strongly discourage them because I know how brutal this can be. So when you still haven't gotten to that point of being able to make a living from it, you have to make a lot of sacrifices, as in sacrificing. If you have to work a job or whatever, you're going to school, whatever it is, what are you willing to sacrifice? In lots of cases, it's sacrifice a social life. In other cases that I've seen, and I don't recommend this, people sacrifice having jobs and just like couch surf and live like bums while they're putting all of their energy into music. I don't recommend that because that typically doesn't end well. But you're still going to need to put in the same amount of work no matter what. So, it's tough when you haven't gotten to that point, but that is what you have to do. And that means getting really, really great at your instrument, great at writing, knowing exactly where it is you want to go, understanding the business side of it, understanding branding, understanding marketing, being good at making connections. There's a lot to it.
What do you feel is the most under-prioritized skill for people trying to make a living off their original music?
Getting great at it.
Yeah.
Because that, at the end of the day, wins over everything else. If most of the time when I hear about an artist that should be bigger, or an artist that's just overlooked by the industry, something, you hear about like local artists that are more talented than some big band. Most of the time I hear those artists and it's just not true. They're just not as
Yeah.
good. They're just straight up not as good. And if they are good enough, they typically end up getting noticed because there's a whole industry of people whose job is to notice. Now, lots of times when you have smaller artists who might be talented enough to make it happen, but don't have their shit together on a personal level or a business level, they tend to get in their own way and basically crash the plane before it even hits cruising altitude. Sometimes before it even leaves the runway, they've already crashed the plane. And then it doesn't matter how talented they are or not. But even the biggest fuck up of a person, if they write great music and they're really, really great at their instrument and they can run social media, they can still get known, and the industry will deal with them.
Well, I feel like there's sort of this. The way I view it is like the quality of the music is sort of the that is always going to dictate the upper ceiling of what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if it was a variable in a math equation from 0 to 1, where 0 is the worst thing you've ever heard and 1 is like the Beatles, right? It's like just as a metaphor for like truly, truly great, right? It's like if you're at an 0.4, it's a lot harder to get enough people into the point, but also if you're at an 0.8, a lot of other things don't actually have to happen because you're in the upper rung. Right, and I think that's where people miss out. It's that thing. I was talking about this with someone the other day about how the people who are good at writing grants are not the people, and getting grant money from like government organizations are not generally the people who make the best music.
Unless they're from Canada.
Yeah, but even then, like, but what I'm trying to say is like, it's always a modifier of how good the songs are.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing else.
Totally.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, because contrary to popular belief, you can't industry plant a fan base. You can't pay for a fan base either. I know that makes people's heads explode because they see artists they don't like getting huge, and they think that should be me. Obviously, this is just bought and paid for. It's just marketing. That's the only reason. But that's cope. That's pure cope. Because if you know how the industry works and you see the sheer volume of stuff that gets put out, and I don't just mean a bunch of like, the rando tens of thousands of accounts that upload to Spotify every day. I mean labels or independent artists who can actually fund their own stuff. The sheer volume of stuff that's put out is it's overwhelming. And even stuff with a really big budget flops all the time. And if you want a perfect example of this, you just look at Hollywood. Hollywood, in the past few years, especially with like Disney movies, Marvel movies, who have started to go downhill in terms of how much money they're making. Yet they have gone uphill in terms of how much money they're spending. You cannot spend enough money to make people interested in what you're doing. It has to be what you're actually doing that people are interested in. And there's a couple of modifiers, a couple of like power-ups you can use along the way that might help. Like if the band are really good looking, if they have a gimmick, so that can get you from 0.4 to 0.5. But it's not going to get you from 0.4. Like, if take Slipknot, for example. Okay, a lot of people are like, yeah, it's just the masks. I remember when they got big, the whole thing was, it's just a gimmick. It's just the masks. But if they had actually sucked and they just had a really cool look and were really good.
Or they'd just be Mushroom Head.
You said it, but yes.
No. I just think it's really funny when people call Slipknot a gimmick band, because there's literally another band doing the same thing. And I'm not even trying to like shit on Mushroom Head. It's just like
they even have a guitar player with a similar mask as Mick Thompson.
Yeah,
and there was one point in time around Iowa where they had the same exact, or not exact, but close to the same exact uniforms in the two bands. It was crazy because they looked just like each other, but one of them had great songs and the other one didn't. I think a lot of people, they see that and they wish it was them. And so rather than confront the idea that maybe their music just isn't good enough, or maybe they're not doing what it takes to get themselves out there, it's easier to think, well, these people have some advantage that I don't have. Like these are plants, or the gimmick is doing it. I'm really as good as them. I'm better, but they have that gimmick.
But okay. So then the question then follows, how do I know that my music is good enough?
People respond to it.
What does that look like?
It looks like people that you don't know spreading it to other people you don't know. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter at what level. I forget if it was Dr. Dre who said this, but that if you can't win over your own block, how are you going to, how do you expect to go platinum if you can't even take over your own block? Right? Similar sort of idea. And I feel like someone in Trivium, I heard them say something similar of like, if a band can't become the biggest local band or the biggest regional band in their area, back when that kind of was more of a thing, how do they expect to become the biggest national band? Or if a band wants to go from metal to like radio rock or something, like sometimes bands used to do, well, they can't even win it. It's different though. They haven't ditched the screaming, which is interesting. Back in those days, it was way more blatant. But the idea being that if you can't even win in a smaller pond, how are you going to survive in the bigger pond? And so when you're unknown, you can't be thinking about it in terms of thousands of people yet, or tens of thousands. You should just be looking at small results. And the results are, do people who I don't know, who I have not personally spoken to, like this? And are they spreading it to other people who I don't know, who I've never spoken to? When there was no internet and the video game thing wasn't as all encompassing as it is now, and you didn't have all these streaming services, people went out a lot more, and they went to local shows a lot more. I know that they do sometimes now, but I know just based on how many clubs and bars have closed that used to do that kind of stuff in cities I'm familiar with, and going on tour and speaking to locals and hearing about the state of their scene, I know that local scenes are basically a shadow of what they used to be, and it's because people just don't go out as much as they used to, and because they have way more things to take up their attention. So there used to be a time where when people had less things that they were distracted by, one thing they would do is go and watch shows. They would even go to local shows and check out bands they had never even heard. That was actually a thing. I don't think that's so much of a thing. So there were bands who would, tour regionally and do it over and over and over, and, do regional tours and then more regional tours and sell CDs out of their back seat or out of their trunk, and built a career that way. And that's what I mean, is basically creating a sphere of influence for for your band. Now, I'm not saying that that's impossible now. I'm just saying it's not quite as possible as it used to be.
This is only half the interview. In the back half of the interview, Eyal and I get even deeper, talking about exactly what it takes for an artist to really break through in 2026.
I want to talk about something that is got us all a little frazzled, and I think a lot of musicians. It's a tweet, and I believe she actually has deleted it. She's gotten so many pushback, but it's an investor of Suno, granted. So mind you, this person is a little biased. Her name's CC Gong, and she, initially is congratulating Suno for hitting 300 million ARR. I think that means like how much it's making, a month essentially, when it's 2 million paid subscribers.
Revenue, right?
Oh, so annual. Yeah. Excuse me. I'm not good with the SaaS lingo. But I think what everybody is upset about, and we have it highlighted here, that she said is, I've personally shifted most of my listening to Suno. I was so tired of Spotify giving me the same overplayed recommendations when everyone can create and catalog becomes infinite and music becomes more personalized. This resonated with me so much, I immediately deleted all my DSPs and downloaded Suno, and now I exclusively listen to just Suno. I'm assuming you guys did the same.
Yeah, obviously.
Oh, okay.
Obviously.
Yeah.
No, but it's like
24/7 now.
So, okay, so I know Dustin's about to go off.
It's like, what can I get in here? I already went off online, actually, I can take a breather.
Got it out of your system, but I think so. There's a couple things I think are egregious here. I think the thing that I really started thinking about was, I don't think music is supposed to be personalized, because I was thinking about, Jesse always talks about music is a consequence-free emotion altering drug, and a lot of how we market our music is kind of highlighting the emotions that you're going to make someone feel and trying to get people to get more excited about that emotional hit, which is true. But I think there's a second layer, which is that a huge part of the appeal of music for me is the fandom. It is I am in a community of other people who also like to talk about Iron Maiden, and it's fun to hang out with your friends and listen to Iron Maiden real loud and sing along on the chorus. That's fun, right? It's fun to show your friend something they think they're gonna like, and then having a communal experience. I don't want It's less fun enjoying things when you are the only person who likes that thing, because it does feel special to you, which is great. And that there can be projects where that makes sense and it feels personal. But I think that it's so exciting when you have your weird specific thing you like, and then you meet someone else who is into that same weird specific thing. You know what I mean? And to me, it's isn't that part of the point? Isn't part of the point larger than life communal experiences and being part of something greater than yourself? And
there's one analogy that's not perfect, but and again, just kind of playing devil's advocate here, because I think honestly we mostly all agree that this is kind of crazy that someone would just only listen to Suno. But
some real psychopath behavior.
There are people that they love reading books, and they love talking with other people that read books. But there's other people that write books, and they don't necessarily they might also love reading, but they might not love the communal aspect of reading the same way. Or on the flip side, there's people that love talking about baseball and watching it and hanging out together. There's other people that love playing baseball, and it's a different thing. Now, the baseball example is bad because you do play baseball with friends, so it's not a lonely thing. But if you're hanging out with friends playing baseball, you might talk about playing baseball, but it's different than the people who are solely into it from a fandom perspective. So that's kind of in a way the Suno people.
Yeah, but you wouldn't watch a you wouldn't make the computer play the computer in MLB 2025 or whatever, and which is the baseball video game, and just watch that game. You wouldn't watch two computers play against each other, even if you could make it 1927 Yankees versus 1960 Pirates. or something.
And
I know
that's
baseball
a really
lore.
good analogy, though. Like if I always thought about that. Like, are there any psychos that just set up two Madden teams on, on the video game and just watch them play?
It's like, how is that different from watching football? Right? How is it different?
It's so different,
totally
right?
different.
Against each other.
It's so
No,
Well, no. That's the point. Is like it
But
is
that is the
actually a
question.
really good analogy because, like, on one hand, you have two human teams. It's both just two teams playing each other. It's just one's not real and one is real. So what's the difference? It's just the fact that there's real humans in it or not. And so I think that's actually
and
a
in
really
this
good
case, I
example
almost
of
feel
why
like
the Suno, listening to just Suno all the time is kind of like crazy because no one would ever just watch two Madden teams play each other.
Well, and let me ask you a question too, because maybe I'm misunderstanding the platform, and I have spent time on the platform. Excuse me, I have to pin somebody again. It unpinned it. This
unpinned.
whole platform is psychotic. So no. I have a question because she says that, like, okay, you're gonna listen to music that's personalized for you, but when I've used the platform, it feels so uncontrolled anyways. Like, if I'm like, I want to hear this with this sort of sounds and this genre, what it usually comes out with is mostly unexpected anyways. So what's really the difference? I'm either listening to unexpected mushy noise on Suno or unexpected playlist that's being served to me on a radio station on FM, right? Like, what are we... you're still getting... Unless there's something I'm not understanding, that it's reading your brain and your exact emotion, I don't really see... What she's saying isn't even really accurate, is, I guess, my point.
You can... I mean, I always view, like, the experience of playing with Suno to be more like playing a game. It's like, I want to create this cool, fun little niche thing that I would never invest hundreds of hours into making from scratch because it's just a fun thing. But the way I could imagine doing it is, like, let's say you find some style that feels like something you wish existed, and then you turn it into a persona, and then you just generate a bunch of music in that persona, and you effectively can just one-click button make infinite music and then turn it into a playlist and listen to it all day. And I think they might have a radio station thing where you can make a prompt and it'll generate infinite music off that prompt as well. So I think
that
there is
seems
a way
to make more sense
to be like, I want Viking themed death metal, but it has catchy choruses. But the verses are just straight up brutality, and it's all Viking stuff. And then you can make instant music on that.
But it's just silly because, like, that's literally just Amon and Marth. Who are, like, one of the biggest.
But
you know what I mean?
What if you didn't like something about them? You're like, oh man, I would love this band if they had this.
It just doesn't make sense to me because it's like, okay, so I don't like Amon Amarth for whatever reason. Well, then there's, like, a whole fucking genre of Amon Amarth aren't Viking metal, they're melodic death metal, just to be clear. But but, like, you have to think about, like, I was so confused by the, like, oh, Spotify shows me the same overplayed shit. Yeah, it's because you're not listening to interesting shit. Like, even with that Spotify AI DJ that everyone got upset about, it took me, like, one prompt to get, like, some really interesting, like, avant-garde noise stuff I hadn't heard before, and I listened to a lot of that kind of stuff, right? Like, if you take, like, a modicum of initiative, that is honestly the same amount of initiative you need to put into Suno from my experiences with it. Maybe I'm just a shitty prompter, but it just feels like there's Reddit threads for this, and then you can just, like, go listen to bands, and guess what? Because of streaming, it's basically free, and you can just skip when you don't like the thing. And it's like... Yeah,
Daylist is great for that, for discovery and listening to, like, some really unique stuff.
My Spotify algorithm is like fire. Like, it is
really amazing.
New stuff, and it's not like just big band. In fact, like, I don't know, just the other day, like 2 days ago, it recommended me some band I'd never heard of that had less than 100,000 monthly listeners that I instantly was like, I love this. And I can't remember their name because I only listened to 3 songs and went to bed. But it was Mood Ring.
Okay, oh yeah, that's a cool band.
145,000 monthly listeners. But it's not only shoving mainstream crap in front of you. It's like I was listening to Thornhill or something, and then it just started generating radio after I finished what I listened to. And it was like, whoa, this is a freaking awesome band. And I went and listened to a couple songs back to back, and it's not like a Taylor Swift. And it's, you just have to listen to a little bit of things that aren't mainstream on purpose, and like you'll start getting not mainstream things, and it's way less effort to do that than prompting Suno.
Yeah, that's the other thing I thought too, is like I was looking while we were talking at just some of the features, and there are like playlists that will pull from other like mood stuff that other people have made. But this, I mean, what she's saying, like how she's saying, like, oh, this is the way the features work on Spotify, it's just outright lying, right? And I think this idea that it's got 2 million subscribers. By the way, I subscribe to Suno. I do it because this is our industry and we have to understand this shit. And I subscribe to a lot of things I don't necessarily support. But I'm going to get canceled for that probably by all these artists listening to this.
For subscribing to Suno.
I don't think, I think most artists probably do too, but I think it's because it's a fun thing. It is fun. Like my daughter likes to come in and she'll write lyrics down. She's 5, right? She's like, I want to put these lyrics in there and then tell it to make it like a K-pop song, right? Like that to me is valuable. That is fun and interesting. But stop trying to replace an industry with this slop. Yeah. Because it is like saying like, oh, hey, Madden, that video game is great. Why do we even need the NFL? Why don't we just put Madden in, get 2 teams? You don't even need to turn on. You can watch football all year around. Just put Madden in and choose the Eagles and choose the Falcons, and they'll play each other. And you can watch that game over and over again infinitely.
And it's more customizable. You could up the
and it's more customizable.
Rating. You know, like it's like football, but people have
the plot of why people like football. Like it is.
Yeah, no, and like yeah, and I think that's like, you know, and then it turns into this thing where it's like, sure, esports are a thing, but the games that tend to
humans playing a game. That's
well, yeah, I was
going to
say
game.
Yeah, exactly, because it's all, and also like the esport thing, like. From what I understand, there's not a big esports community around like Madden or something for a variety of reasons about how those games work. But like there's still like human creativity when like 2 people are playing each other in Fortnite or whatever, right? Yeah.
But this is like setting computers to play, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. We're not watching.
People will pay to watch or watch for free 2 Overwatch teams play each other in a competition.
Yeah, but that makes sense.
Watch 2 bot Overwatch teams playing each other, even if those bots I think play just as good. I think the fact that there's like humans that have spent thousands of hours rehearsing and practicing is what gives the game meaning. And without that, like suffering or practice, I don't think it has any meaning for people.
But I think it's also like, you know, chess is a really good example of this, where like the best players in the world are spending a lot of time studying with computers who have been higher rated than the highest rated chess player in the world since like the 90s, right? Fine. You know, we can definitely learn things about how different approaches to the game, and that's definitely been a thing. But like, yes, you could go watch 2 3,000 rated chess bots play each other, but you lose a sense of the psychology behind it, you know? And like, oh, does this guy see this set of moves or not, you know? And yeah, you know, and what we consistently see in my experience, and I've seen this in other industries, and I believe it's mostly going to shake out this way in music, like people don't want too much customization generally, because like you could like look at it this way. The t-shirt industry. Right now, all of us are about 20 minutes away from prompting a cool image that we want and then getting it made print to order on a t-shirt. The amount of people doing that is extremely low, I would say. And because people don't really want that level of personalization in most cases.
Mm. You'd rather just go to the store and pick out a shirt that someone has designed already and put some thought into it because they don't want
it. But not just put some thought into it, but it's part of a larger thing. I'm wearing a Phillies hoodie. This is part of a larger thing. You're wearing a Deftones shirt. It's part of a larger thing, yeah. Right? Like it's like this Phillies hoodie design is extremely not fancy. Right? Like any of us could have figured this out in, 10 minutes.
The design is just about as good as the team, so it matches.
Yo, we had 96 wins last year. Fuck you, okay?
I don't know shit about the Phillies. All I know is my brother's a fan and he's always complaining.
I don't even know what sport that is. Or I don't even...
What sport?
What do you do all day, Andrew? What's the... I worry so much about you.
Andrew do all day.
I watch one sport game a year, and it's the Super Bowl, and I watch the commercials just
sport game.
One day I'm gonna visit you, and I'm gonna be like, it's gonna be like visiting like Mars.
I just always, before I met him in LA, I just assumed he only existed in that room because I don't think I've ever seen him outside of that room other than in person.
But to circle back, like, I think that. But I think that some of this also ties into sort of that larger sort of conspiracy theory I've talked about before on the podcast of like way more people are completely checked out of society than we think. And I think this is just another way for those people who are completely checked out to be even more checked out.
I think the tech bros got it wrong. I think it's a bunch of nerdy guys who don't have a creative bone in their body, mostly investors and people who don't even do the daily work. And they severely misunderstand people's attraction to creativity and things that surprise them. I mean, was it Sam Altman or who was it that said like music is so hard to create nowadays? Musicians don't want to make music. Like
that was the CEO of Suno.
It was the CEO. Yeah, that makes sense. What's his name? Let's call him out because that shit. I mean, it still gets replayed all the time. And these guys, I think, in their head, Michael Schulman, they think their product is revolutionizing the world. And they've got us all convinced at a certain level that AI is changing the face of everything. And in some ways, like most technologies, I would put it akin to the internet itself. I do think it does change a lot of things. But the internet didn't fundamentally shift what human beings enjoy. So this idea that they're replacing elements, creativity, human connection, community, they're so up their own ass. Like all they can smell is their own farts. And it's just they're going to have a rude awakening when the bubble busts because it's just, especially with Suno, they have a fun little goofy app. That's about the extent of it. And I don't think it's ever going to be more than that.
One interesting side effect of this lady's CC Gong is her like statement about how she goes and listens to music and she can hyper-personalize it to her own tastes, is she basically just made an argument for the walled garden approach that Udio's going with and not Suno. Because like the whole Suno thing is like we don't want to do the walled garden thing like Universal's doing. We want to keep it open where people can download their stuff and distribute it. Well, you can only get the hyper-personalization in the walled garden model where you're listening in Suno. Therefore, download.
Can you explain what the walled garden is?
So the Universal is partnering with Udio, and their approach is you can license our music, and you can even like remix songs from our artists, and this is going to take years to develop and stuff. But the idea is you can't download anything. All consumption will happen in Udio, and or if they partner with someone else. So they might, you know how you can like tag music from like an Instagram audio library? Maybe you can tag Udio remixes from an Instagram library. You can't download it, you can't distribute it. So therefore, you can't compete with the artist that made it. You're not extracting revenue from the industry. Whereas Suno and Warner and I think Sony, maybe, I don't know if they've reached an agreement yet, their argument is that they don't want the walled garden thing. They do want you to be able to download the music from these platforms. But the hyper-personalization only exists on the platform. So her post kind of admits the merit to the walled garden approach that Suno is kind of pushing against.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing is like the Supreme Court basically said AI created music isn't copyrightable, I think today. And yeah, I think that also takes away a lot of what the value is of this. I do think, to push back on you, Dustin, I do think like the big fundamental changes I see coming with AI music are going to be a lot of backing tracks and instrumentation and arrangement type stuff. I think that stuff is going to get wiped pretty quickly. But I think that's a very different animal. But I see that having more issues.
You can hear it though, man. And maybe it'll get so good that you can't. But God, like
97% of people can't though.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Is 97%? We talked about this with Eyal on the interview later in this episode.
Technically, it's already over the interview.
Oh yeah, right.
This is sorry. I think we talked about this in the back half of the interview. So
we
you
don't
have to
do.
subscribe
We
for
don't.
this.
Oh yeah, subscribe to hear about this. But go on.
Yeah.
But something Eyal and I talk about is part of the problem with that survey is 97% of people can't tell the difference. However, there's a difference between fandom and that. Although I'm sure that you could generate a fully AI world, but we'll put that aside for now. But the thing I was thinking about that is 97% of people also can't. You can play them a poorly mixed Taylor Swift song, and when I say poorly mixed, I mean the local guy who knows how to do mixing, but it's $100 a mix, and he's not a wizard, versus the end result Taylor Swift song. And they will tell you, oh, the end result Taylor Swift song is better, but they will not be able to tell you why it's better than the local guy doing his bedroom studio mix versus the however many $1 million Taylor Swift mix, right?
Well, and in some ways, that's been a thing in pop music for a while, the sterilization of tracks. In metal, especially, I went back and listened to some old school metal, and even now you're missing so much of the room with these quantized. Is that the phrase?
Yeah,
the drums being so programmed.
No, I mean that's a big piece of it, right? And I actually do think there's a lot of the mixing engineers in pop today are excellent. And people are paying those people thousands of dollars for a reason. There's a reason that, Charlie XCX, I'm sure, knows people who would love to mix her record for free, but they're not at the standard of the person she wants to work with. Right. And I think but people can't tell. Most people don't have the ears to understand, but they would be able to say, oh, the one mixed by whoever is up here and the one mixed by some average Joe is down here. But they wouldn't say it was the mix. They would just say, "Oh, it feels better."
One's better than the other." Yeah, and
Cool.
maybe that'll be.
Someone did a study where they showed people a song that was melodined and another song that was not melodined, and the non-melodined one was still on key. All the vocals were still very well performed, but one was tightened tuning wise to be just super snappy, and they polled a certain number of people, and it was more than half of them said this version's better, and it was the melodined one, but they couldn't put their finger on why it was better. It was just because it was more on tune and their brain couldn't decipher why it was, but they were still able to pinpoint it out. But I guess with the AI, the study, they couldn't even tell this one's AI, this one's not.
Yeah, but I think there's something to be said. People can't tell you this one's mixed well, this one's not mixed well.
Yeah, and I will say one other thing that does frighten me. So I mentioned earlier about how my 5-year-old likes to write lyrics, and we focus on I teach her how to play keys. We have a drum set at home. We go through these things, and the other day she's like, "Can we make a song with your phone?" And I said, "Why don't we go play the keys?" And she's like, "It's easier to make a song on the phone." Now in her mind, her 5-year-old mind, the act of creativity is hearing what she's created amplified to a million, right? And she doesn't know how to make that happen on the keyboard. So I recognize part of it is I created this thing and I want to hear it at its maximum. But it does terrify me that in her mind, and maybe this is the way people felt about auto-tune, in her mind they're one and the same, right? One is a shortcut to see and hear her vision for it. But ultimately, I think the struggle is that anything that we've created, even when we've tried really hard, the rawness that we've been able to create with a guitar or a keyboard, to me, there's a humanity in it. And I do fear that we'll lose that because of the ease of creation.
I mean, guitar tones all becoming dialed down to the same, few things per genre.
Right? Dude, when I was in a band, you would as a guitarist, you would hunt for that tone that people would hear and be like, that timbre only belongs to this person, right? And I think about things like that. How is somebody have a unique timbre? And maybe that's what's truly lost in all this AI slop, is that timbre, the thing that is unique to a singer, an artist, the thing that most artists, that's the thing they spend the most time on. Singers hunt for the timbre that is going to define their entire careers. And that timbre is completely lost with AI. Even when you sing over a track, it's just missing that unique timbre that you can't define.
A lot of the pop, and I don't mean pop music specifically, but like the mainstream stuff in a lot of genres kind of has that problem too. Like as almost any guitarist of any like currently mainstream successful metal band, and it's like, cool, what's your guitar tone? Well, it's either a fractal, Axe effects, it's a neural DSP, and it's pretty much always a 5150 amp with a green scream pedal in front of it, going with a gate and some EQ. Like that's like literally like every metal band. And I'm sure it's the same thing in country. There's some like setting that almost it just has to be, because part of it's just because like when you look up your favorite guitarist and you're like, oh, what was that sound? And it's like, oh, well, it's a 5150. Like, cool. Well, I have multiple ways to do that. I have a neural ESP and I got a freaking Axe effects, and that's also what the same people are using. And part of that I think is the accessibility of these instruments. In the past, it'd be like what the pros were using and the amateurs are using were like radically different. That's now, like anyone can buy a neural DSP plugin for $120 or whatever and have the exact same tone of an artist. Where in the past, like you'd have to buy a big ass tube amp that you can't even play in your house anyways because it's so loud.
I like that accessibility. See, that's the other thing. Like my daughter's excited about music because she's heard an end product. And now I've like got to teach her like, oh, but how do we get there without this tool? Because this is not your vision ultimately.
What if that's what gets her into music? The fact that like she had that joy of creating when she's a kid, which otherwise she only associates music with like boring exercises and learning an instrument or whatever, you know?
And she's growing up in the best possible scenario. Like you have more access to studios than pretty much any other dad. You know? But no, but like, like straight up.
Yeah.
Aside from me, given that I have a home studio, but
okay, Andrew.
Like, just meander into Andrew's home studio. We should probably wrap up on this segment.
If you love this podcast, please remember we have bills to pay to make this as high quality as possible. So about half of our content is going behind a paywall for $5 a month. You can now get our full interviews and 2 to 3 extra segments every week for us, where we discuss what our members tell us they want to hear about and some of the more actionable, high-level stuff that we maybe can't put for full public consumption because one of us might get sued.
I am. Yeah. I want to subscribe.
I talk shit all the time in our behind the paywall.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. We're trying to get this to go as far as it can. So please start a conversation with a musician friend by sending it to them.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. If you're on YouTube, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our episode every Thursday. If you can rate us on Apple and Spotify, it helps us. Tune in next week for more.